This is Scott Michaels, creator of the documentary The 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter and provider of historic content for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You're listening to Rock is Lit.
If you're fascinated by true crime, classic Hollywood, and the darker tales of Tinsel Town, you're in for a treat. In this episode, we dive deep into the murder of Rebel Without a Cause actor Sal Mineo, with Scott Michaels as our guide. Scott Michaels is a renowned expert on celebrity deaths, including the infamous Manson Murders of 1969, and a former tour guide for LA's dearly departed tours. Dubbed by the LA Times as the man who knows where the bodies are buried, Scott brings a wealth of knowledge and a unique perspective to our discussion. He even consulted for Quentin Tarantino on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a film that revisits the Manson family murders. Scott first joined us in Season 2 to discuss the Manson Murders in a bonus episode inspired by Episode 6, which featured Zachary Lazar's rock novel Sway, a story that includes members of the Manson family in a fictional setting. I'm thrilled to welcome Scott back to the podcast to explore another Hollywood tragedy, the murder of Sal Mineo. Born in the Bronx in 1939, Sal Mineo was an Italian-American actor, director, and recording artist, best known for his iconic portrayal of Plato in the 1955 film Rebel Without a Cause. His career spanned theater and film, earning him a place as a teen heartthrob and cultural icon. Beyond his breakout role, Mineo's versatility shone through in films like Exodus, Giant, and The Gene Krupa Story. He was also a trailblazer for LGBTQ+ representation in cinema and theater. In addition to his acting career, Mineo ventured into music and stage direction, further demonstrating his artistic range and creativity. Tragically, his life was cut short when he was murdered in 1976 at the age of 37. Join Scott Michaels and me as we delve into the life and untimely death of Sal Mineo, exploring the mystery and legacy that continue to captivate and inspire. Hey, Scott, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Christy. Thanks for having me back.
We did an interview about this time last year on the Manson Murders, and that was based on a tour you gave me in LA of major Manson sites that, as I said in that video, I will say it again now, if anybody listening is going to be in LA, get this man to take you around to major Manson sites. It's worth every cent. It was wonderful. I'll never forget it.
I am so glad. I am so glad that you enjoyed it. And how about immersing yourself in 1969 is the greatest.
It's incredible. It was just incredible. What's interesting is you picked me up at my hotel, which was Hotel Ziggy, which is across the street down a block from the Comedy Store. And the first stop we made was not a Manson Murders stop. It was the location where Sal Mineo was murdered. And I found that really interesting because I didn't remember telling you that I was a big fan of Sal Mineo. So it was great that that's where we wound up. But I kept thinking later on, gosh, I'd really like to do a special on the murder of Sal Mineo, but Rock is Lit is a podcast devoted to rock novels. I'm thinking, how am I going to do that? It was easy with the Manson Murders because the inspiration for the episode with you was Zachary Lazar's rock novel Sway, which included members of the Manson family in this fictional setting. And then I remembered this 1982 novel by Susan Braudy called Who Killed Sal Mineo? And I mentioned it to you, and you said you'd read it years ago. And I read it when I was probably 13, 14 in the 80s. And I actually ordered it and started reading it again. And I had to stop because I was going to get fact and fiction all mixed up when you and I talked. So I just quit and I'll pick it up again later. But that gave me the perfect out, the perfect in, I should say, to get you back on the show and talk about this really, really interesting murder. And then another point of convergence between Sal and the Manson Murders is when I was doing some research on Sal, I found this photo of him at the Tate murder trial. He's being frisked before he goes into the courtroom. You have any idea why he went to that trial? Did he know these people?
No, I think that, there was a lot of counterculture stuff going on at that time, as you know. he did an appearance on Mike Douglas around that time, I think. And he dressed like Charlie. He had the hair, he had
Yeah.
the jacket with the fringe. It was all very, that. And he spoke, about politics. And I was really sort of surprised because he was on with Ozzy and Harriet, of all people. And it was really, they were very, they interacted well. I was expecting, Mr. and Mrs. Conservative and, Sal's openly, liked men. And but no, there was a really interesting show, and I think that it was just a big part of LA at that time. He may have known some of the people because, I mean, he probably did actually, because as the house was open door, people were coming and going all the time, and Sal hung out on the Sunset Strip, and so did all of them, at the Whiskey and places like that. So they probably knew each other, but a lot of people. I know John Waters went to the trial like almost every day. I know that Jack Nicholson went a few times. He was very close with Roman and Sharon. So he had invested interest. He was close with Roman. Obviously, the downfall of Roman in America happened at Jack's house. So, anyway, that's the Jack Nicholson connection. But I'm just saying Sal was part of the Hollywood crowd, although not you don't read about it a lot. He wasn't involved, but I'm sure he knew everyone casually. Everyone did. Well, and, Sal came to, attention of everyone in Rebel without a cause. And it, interestingly, was released after James Dean's death. But Sal and Jimmy were quite close on the set. Some people would say they had a fling, and Sal Mineo never ever said that. It's implied a lot because clearly Plato was a homosexual, and enamored completely with Dean. And Dean, I wouldn't, people say he was gay. I don't think so. So, I think that he used himself to, get places, but I don't think he was gay. He didn't have a problem with it either. And they say that Jimmy told Sal, I want you to look at me like I look at Natalie Wood. And I thought that was really quite sweet because, Jimmy knew what was going on. He knew the score, even though it was 1954 or 55 when they filmed it, which is quite racy. But Sal was just straight out gay in the movie. You know what I mean? That wasn't, there was, it looked like he wanted to kiss Jimmy several times. And it's weird because that earned him a huge female fan base. Women went crazy over Sal Mineo because, same with Jimmy showing a sensitive side, but Sal was uber sensitive, and somebody, I guess, maybe just wanted to mother, because he lacked, any sort of parent, any parents in the movie, really. He was raised by a housekeeper, basically. Yeah. So, I think people's hearts went out to Sal very early on in his career, and he played, he followed up that with Giant, and it played a sympathetic character who was killed in the war, and people just, again, it's a spoiler, I guess, but so again, someone that you just, it kind of breaks your heart a bit and you want to protect. And I think that was a lot of his appeal, that sort of just vulnerable guy. And I don't think he was really that vulnerable. He just played it very well.
2025 is going to be the 70th anniversary of Rebel Without a Cause. It's amazing that it's still got the power that it has. And of course, most of that is due to James Dean, but Sal Mineo is just adorable in this movie. He's got that, he's this Italian-American kid, and you see that attraction, the obvious attraction that he's got for James Dean. He's incredible in that movie.
Yeah. Yeah, he was, you do, 2 Academy Award nominations. The first one when he was 17, I think, or something. So yeah, that's pretty incredible. And my thing is Dean, and Jimmy, only 3 movies and 2 nominations for Best Actor. And 2 of those movies weren't even released till after he died. I think that's just fascinating. So yeah, but they were good friends. He and Sal, maintained a friendship. Yeah, I think Sal even consulted a psychic or something to talk to Jimmy. I read about that.
Yeah, he did. Point. I really love Giant, but he only had 2 scenes in that movie. He was not in that for very long. Gene Krupa's Story, I've watched over and over. I love that movie. And I recently saw Who Killed Teddy Bear. And I freaking love that movie. It is so creepy.
I was hoping to watch it today, and I didn't get a chance to, but I've never seen it.
It's a totally different kind of role for him, but he's incredible in it, and it's so 1960s. It's a black and white 1965 film, and it's creepy, and there's all of this sexual tension in it, and all of this. I'm not going to say anything else. You have to watch it, and I'll be interested to hear what.
I will. I didn't even know until today that he was in Krakatoa, east of Java.
Oh, I didn't know
had no
that.
idea, which was the movie that was showing on the Cinerama marquee in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Really?
Just as a piece of trivia.
Oh my goodness!
yeah. But
I did not know that. And then I used to watch Creature Feature at night when I was a kid. That would come on at like 11:30 on a Friday night or something, Saturday night maybe. And My Three Sons would come on right before that, reruns, obviously. But I remember watching one time, and there's an episode with Sal Mineo. He comes in and plays Robbie's friend from high school, and he looks like Dennis Hopper in Easy Rider. He's got the hair and the hat and the fringe, like you were saying earlier, and just comes in and plays this total hippie, but he's great in it. So,
it is funny how he did an episode of the Patty Duke Show.
Hi, I'm Sal Mineo.
Yeah, I know. May I call you Mr. Mineo?
Oh, no. You may call me Sal.
Sal was hugely successful, but he certainly his career went poof. Everything in the movies just sort of dried up, and he was doing, My Three Sons, which was probably a joke, to him. He probably goes, I had to do this thing, and it was probably, a couple of grand at that point. But it was interesting because he did play just like a dirty hippie, for the lack of a better term, it's just I don't know if it was My Three Sons' attempt at trying to be cool, or I actually don't remember the episode so well. I remember seeing him in it, but I don't remember. He seems to me like it would be something that people thought he was a bad influence on Robbie or something like that. I don't know, but was that what it was?
Exactly what it was. He comes in on a motorcycle looking like he was in Easy Rider, and wants Robbie to go off and kind of drop the wife and the 3 kids that Robbie now has. It was interesting. Yeah. But did a lot of TV.
Yeah.
He was doing plays at the time of his death. He got typecast after Rebel as this sensitive, kind of tough. The problem with Sal is that when he grew up, he still looked like Plato, just with longer hair. He still had that baby face. So, and he was only, 5'6"? So it was hard for him to get these leading man roles. And you'll see after you watch Who Killed Teddy Bear, he kind of got typecast again after that as this psychotic murderer character. So the roles dried up, as you were saying, and he was now doing theater. So that was the state of his career at the time that he was murdered.
The roles did dry up for him, and he was doing television, but then he just took off, and he gave no, shits. He really gave no shits, and he just started doing gay roles. He did the show with Don Johnson. I forget the name of the play that he was in.
Fortune in Men's Eyes.
Yeah. So he's a young kid in prison, and there's just debauchery, it for them to be betrayed when it did in '69, when homosexuality was probably still illegal, I'm sure, still considered a mental illness, and he just didn't care. He took off and went to London and did stuff on the show there, or on the stage, and he just didn't care who thought what about him. And I thought that was for that time period, it's pretty brave for someone in the public eye.
He and Don Johnson were roommates for a while. And I kept reading conflicting things, like Don Johnson was his roommate at the time of his murder, but that couldn't be true because in '76, Don Johnson had married Melanie Griffith for the first time. Didn't he come out as bisexual in a 1972 interview? And that was brave.
Yeah, no, really, really brave, and also probably confusing for a lot of people because he didn't seem
Hmm.
gay, because he defied whatever people feel is their definition of it, which just interesting. I know I just spoke to a guy today who met Sal at Rodney Bingenheimer's English
Mm.
Disco on the Sunset Strip, and Sal had an interest in him, but he wasn't gay. He and his brother went to Sal's apartment. He says it was like a one-bedroom apartment, jammed, filled with stuff. Like just a memorabilia, not a slob, not a slob, but he also says because one of these two guys who went there was a professional drummer. And Sal's guy says, I got a set of drums Gene Krupa gave me. Do you want to come and check it out? And so they went to Sal's apartment, which was just about a mile away. And I guess the drums were all over the place. The snare was over here and this was over there. But Gene Krupa gave him the drum set. So just to set the stage of where he lived, actually, he did not have a roommate. He couldn't have. I don't think one could fit in there. But it was a modest, like one bedroom apartment at the end.
Well, I was trying to orient myself with regard to where that apartment building is. And I kind of remember how we got there. It's near Barney's Beanery, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah, about maybe a quarter of a mile from there, or half a mile.
Okay, and this is on Holloway?
Yeah, so where you go on Santa Monica Boulevard curves to the left when you head towards the ocean going west. Holloway branches off at Barney's straight on. So basically, you instead of curving left onto Santa Monica Boulevard, just stay straight onto Holloway, and you're there.
Okay, so let's go to that day. He had been rehearsing for P.S. Your Cat is Dead, a play that he was in L.A., and it had actually done very well in San Francisco. He'd been in the play in San Francisco, and now it had come to L.A., and things in his career were really looking good. There was a possibility of a comeback for him. He gets finished with rehearsal. He goes to the apartment, parks in the car park. Take it from there. What happened?
The only thing that we know for sure happened, was that he parked his car and neighbors heard screams, oh my God, please help me, or someone help me, to that effect. And by the time somebody got there, they claimed they saw a white guy who had long hair running away. They found Sal laying there. The first witness that arrived there said they found him in a fetal position and with a puddle of blood underneath him going, because it's on an incline, the alley back there. There's about, when you go into this alley, I don't know if you remember, there's about 5 sets ascending of garages that hit two cars in each, and they're open. They're not the closed garages; they're carports basically. And Sal parked, and he was stabbed. They rolled him over. He was still alive. The neighbor attempted mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, but he said, at that point, he knew he was dead by the time law enforcement showed up. So, but they did supposedly see a man that was, running away, a blonde guy with long hair, and then they changed it to something else, and it turned out to be something completely else. Mm. But because of Sal's death, and then he was doing P.S. Your Cat is Dead, which is a great story if you haven't seen it or read a synopsis of it. It's a really good story about a guy who's being burgled and turns the tables and ties up the burglar, and it's a funny, weird book. And James Kirkwood is a great author. Since the play had a gay tone to it, and because Sal lived near the Sunset Strip, which was, they say, notoriously kinky Sunset Strip, which I think is hilarious, is where the rock and roll clubs are, but I wouldn't call it. But they say he was into sadomasochism. Now, I know for a fact that he was aggressive with guys, I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say, I don't know physically, like in bed, I don't know what that was like, but I know that if he liked somebody, he was physically aggressive. Now, like these people who I spoke to today, it was clear that Sal was interested. And when he got into the house, he set a chair right in front of him, and Sal put his foot on the chair right between the guy's legs. It was pretty provocative. Didn't reach out and grab him or anything like that. But John Provost, who played Timmy and Lassie, says they were close, but then Sal was quite aggressive with him in a sexual way, not to the point where they actually had sex, but it really freaked him out. So Sal was that confident with himself that he would, maybe it's that celebrities think they can get away with everything. I don't know. But I do know that Sal was aggressive. They say sadomasochism. I don't know, because I've never heard of any concrete evidence of that when they searched his house or anything. I don't know really what came out of searching. I can't see where that came from. But because he was gay, probably still illegal at that time, still a mental illness that took a whole different spin, because they first thought robbery, because that was typical, that could have happened. But then he had his wallet, and his wallet had, just, I don't know, $30 in it or something like that. Yeah. So I don't know exactly what the guy was after, if he saw the wallet and there was nothing in it, or was the wallet going through? Actually, I do know that Sal was screaming, and that freaked the guy out, and he took off running. That's what he said later on. So maybe he didn't get a chance to frisk him and see if his wallet was there. Maybe because I guess at the end he was only worth like $8,500 or something like that. Crazy, nothing money. Right. But I think it was supposed to be a robbery, but it didn't even get the wallet. So.
Yeah, so then they think, oh, maybe drugs. He's near the Sunset Strip. It's the mid-'70s. He's a celebrity. But then they go inside, the cops go inside his apartment, and I read that they saw lots of photos of naked men and reading material that included sexually explicit content. And then they went, oh, is he gay? And then they start asking people and find out that he is. And that shifted everything. That just changed the investigation. Nothing else is really seriously being considered for all of the reasons that you said earlier. I don't think homosexuality was decriminalized in California until 1976, and he was murdered in February, so it probably was still illegal at that point.
And everybody has
which is
porn. You know what I mean? It's like, just. I mean, it's those. I remember going to bookstores when I was young, and they had the little paperback salacious novels and stuff like that. So yeah, his homosexuality kicked it all off, and he was also known to smoke pot occasionally. I think he took LSD once in a while. So yeah, it just became sinister at that point, because they say most murders are solved in 24 to 48 hours, and once it gets beyond that, they go into they had a year and a half before they got any leads on it. So during that year and a half, John Lennon, I guess, was a person who contributed to a reward. I think that his friends, were trying to get this thing solved. The police department had a devoted line to the investigation. They said it just was rang off the hook almost every day for a year to, people coming up with how's the investigation going, or I did it, kind of a thing, or I think I know who did it. So like a lot of things, if they have a lot of time to think about it, they overthink it, and they come up with really bizarre scenarios.
So he had been with the actor and retired acting coach Courtney Burr III for like 6 years. It was an open relationship. Do you know if was he suspect number one, or did they rule him out early, or were they thinking this might have? Okay.
Yeah, he had an alibi. Yeah, I don't know much about any people of interest at that time. I really don't. I know that I think they went to the quote gay clubs, whatever they were at that point, and probably questioned a lot of people and a lot of Sal's friends, no doubt. But he had a large group of friends, and also he was sexually indiscriminate. He whored around. It was before AIDS, and with guys, it's all on the outside. So it's just a bit of, you can be indiscriminate about it. It's less intimate, and it's more about just indulgence, really. And I think that he was happy with that. It was, he had guys coming up to him like crazy. He's Sal Mineo, you know?
Yeah, and he was a good-looking man and so young when he died, only 37. So I couldn't find the autopsy, but I did see something online about that he died. Oh, you have it! Oh my God!
I did get it. I told you I was going to try.
Of course you do.
I was going to try it. I did get it before.
Of course you do. When I didn't hear anything back from you about that, I thought, well, he mentioned that it might be difficult to find. That's no sweat. We'll just, we'll talk around it. You found it. You were my hero.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
In fact, I took it to. I showed you that video that I took at the murder scene, and I went to that. I went and read it on camera to at the location because just the scenario. It was autopsy reports tend to be really boring, but there's the witness statements are in here, the original, the investigating detectives, and that's probably been published, but the rest of it's pretty boring, as they are. They're technical.
Well, tell me some highlights from that. What is the official cause of death?
Official cause: massive hemorrhage, stab wound to chest, perforating the heart. That is the actual cause of death. And I'll read this the detective's statement if you want me to about how.
Yeah, do it.
Said at approximately 21:30, which makes it 9:30.
9:30.
On February 12, 1976, cries for help were heard by tenants from the rear of 8567 Holloway Drive. LA Sheriff's Office was alerted and units responded to the rear of 8567 and found the decedent on his side in the fetal position in the driveway between carports R7 and R6 with a stab wound to the left chest. Fire Rescue Unit 7 responded, turned the decedent on his back, cut jacket and shirt, and attempted resuscitation. He was pronounced dead at 21:55 hours. This investigator and James coroner photographer responded to the scene. He photographed the decedent and searched his body. His decedent's wallet containing $21 in bills found in his left jacket pocket, yellow metal pocket watch with a chain on it, jacket pocket, coins in left pants pocket, 85 cents and change, found on the pavement under him, a white metal ring noted on his left index finger and left on his body when they took him. Several restaurant receipt stubs and 2 cards with names and phone numbers found in his pockets were retained by Sergeant PIA for further investigation. His hands were bagged at the scene for protection for the crime scene investigation. Body just explains the position in his body. The decedent's automobile parked in the carport at the rear of apartment number 1, a short distance west of where he was found. So that is the detective's statement at the time. The rest of it is sort of, this is a description of his injuries. They show, this is a body shot, where it shows exactly where he was stabbed. And they also found a couple of injection marks, which was another thing that made them look at the drug angle originally, because he got testosterone injections in his buttocks. So that's where that came from. But and I was trying to. The one thing I always like looking at in these things is that. The stomach contents, because I always like to know what people, I want to know what they're wearing, and I want to know, because when you wake up in the morning, what do you put on? Do you know that's going to be, they call it your ghost clothes, whatever you die in is what your ghost is. And it's sort of just interesting. It makes you think when you're going to go out, what you're dressed like. That kind of stuff interests me very much.
What was in the stomach?
The esophagus has an intact mucosa throughout. The stomach contains an estimated digested food, recognizable dark green vegetables, and ground meat. No tablets, capsules, or residue of medications are found. So vegetables and ground meat, that could be pasta of some sort, maybe. Liver weighs 1390, has a smooth, intact calf. I always like when they describe organs as glistening. It was such a weird word. But anyway, so we're giggling away at this sort of thing.
Well, what can you do? And I
Yeah.
mean, we're both fascinated by this stuff. No disrespect to Sal, no disrespect to the dead. It's just fascinating.
And it's also we're you and I are like desensitized to this sort of thing, so we
Yeah.
could look at it a lot more objectively than people who are emotionally invested in him.
Right.
They did have to do an oral and an anal swab on him. They did do that to rule out, being a sex issue, because some people said, maybe he had sex with somebody and it went wrong. But no, there was no issue with that. The big time description of the wounds, and it's interesting to note that when they do the autopsy, they save pieces of that person until it's a closed case. So in this case, they actually removed a stab wound from him and kept it at the coroner's office for evidence. And part of the way they solved this crime was by matching a knife to the stab wound perfectly. So it's just sort of, and then I found this out really recently that they do that. And after the case is solved, they will offer the body parts that they saved back to the families. Sometimes when the family, like the decedent, like Natalie Wood, for instance, they did remove parts of her, but they were able to close the case before she was buried. So they basically put it in a bag and put it at her feet inside her casket. And sometimes, relatives will ask that to be buried with them. They'll exhume or something and they'll put it under there. A lot of times they'll just scatter, cremate and scatter. So, but Sal's, was all, I don't know what they did with it, but the family were notified and they probably just said, dispose it with the rest of the medical waste that they have when they do, that sort of thing. But it's just interesting how they save a stab wound. And until they don't need it anymore, because I know unidentified people, which there's about 1,000 a year that they find in Los Angeles. They have to cremate them, but they keep jawbones, and so they can identify ultimately with dental records. So they have like just those stacks and stacks of like Tupperware containers with jawbones with John Doe, Jane Doe with numbers on them. I'll look at the toxicology. Yeah, I'm looking at now. They looked at codeine and morphine, not determined. Because he was also said to have done cocaine at one point in time. No, absent of any alcohol, not determined any barbiturates. So it seems to me like he was completely clean and sober at that point.
Okay, so we go, a year and a half, nobody knows what happened, and finally there's a break. So what happened to lead them in the direction of the guy that they wound up arresting?
Well, he was, Lionel Williams who we're talking about. He is the murderer. And he had an extensive criminal record to start with. And he was in a prison in Michigan and blabbed to his cellmate that he was the one that did it. I killed somebody. Who'd you kill? That actor, Sal Mineo, or however that was presented to him. So the cellmate went to the authorities and they wired him, or they put a bug in the cell. And over the next, month or two, he got him to talk about Sal Mineo 2 times, having enough information to charge him and bring him back to extradite him back to California to be tried for Sal's murder. And then it came out later that night he went home and he was covered in blood and told his wife, I just killed an actor in Hollywood. And then it came on the news later on and said, that's the guy I killed. But she wouldn't testify against him at the trial. So it could have been dealt with a lot sooner had she done that.
She eventually did give a polygraph and passed. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think I read that she killed herself afterward, after she spilled the beans on him. And they don't have the knife. She didn't have the knife, but I guess she described it or something, and the cops went out and got one, and they were able, you mentioned saving the stab wound. It fit, and that was the missing piece. That was the clincher. Like, yes, that's the knife.
Yeah, I thought that was odd too, so either she had a knife, or she described it, what the handle looked like, but somehow they got a knife, not the knife, but they got a knife that was exact, and had enough to charge. Now, some people say they got the wrong guy. I've read that too.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I was going to bring that up, that because the first eyewitness reports were of a white guy with blonde hair running away. How did they reconcile that?
I don't know. Because for those that don't know, Lionel Ray Williams is a black guy. He's So, he can't be confused with a long-haired blonde white guy. He was a 19-year-old black guy. So I don't know how they rectified that. Some people would say they just wanted to close the case, but it had already been a year and a half. So, and they could have closed it easier than that, I think. But his wife corroborates it by her statement. And, so I don't know how it actually came about. I'm sure there's probably something written somewhere about it, but I haven't been able to find it yet.
Wasn't this his first or his only murder, that he had been robbing people, mugging people, but it had never gotten to this point before? So when he finally was arrested, he was already in jail for robbery. And then they try him for Sal's murder, but there are also other robberies tacked on to Sal's murder that are all involved in the trial that finally sent him to prison for however many years. But he was paroled in 1990?
Yeah, he was. They got him for 10 robberies. They were charging him with attempted murder, which they dropped that. But he was convicted of Sal's murder and 10 robberies during the same trial. So, and he was convicted to 51 years, I think it was. And this was back in 1978, maybe, that he was convicted, 78, 79. But he only served 12, and they paroled him. And I don't know why that is. But within 5 months, he was back in for robbery. And he's just, a career criminal. I know when they said he was a pizza delivery boy at the first study, which I think is fascinating. And also, that alley is not something you stumble upon. That's not something that you just, he must have seen, Sal driving in or something. But I read somewhere that he was lying in wait. But you could be in that little alleyway for a very long time with no action. So that's odd. It's not the first place I'd go if I was going to rob somebody, that particular alley,
right.
Because also there are ways out, but you have to know them. There's little passageways onto Holloway Drive. But otherwise, the most obvious is back down the alley again. So I don't know. It is odd. It's a weird place for it to take place. He must have followed Sal, saw his car coming in or something.
Well, that's interesting, because it's not like he had some big fancy car. It was a blue, was it a Chevelle?
Chevelle or something like that. Yeah.
It wasn't a Rolls Royce. And the guy, I read the guy claimed that he didn't even know who Sal Mineo was.
I believe that.
But then why would you be there? I don't know. It's a very strange thing now that you mention it. But why was he there? Because it isn't an obvious place where you would go to rob somebody.
Yeah, I mean, did he go back there to relieve himself? It's not something you'd stumble on. It's like Cielo Drive. It's not something you just it's not something you just stumble on. It's you got to know it's there, kind of thing. So maybe he'd delivered a pizza around there somewhere before or something like that. I don't know.
Okay, that's a good point. So apparently he was finally paroled in 2000. That's the last of the information I could find on him. I don't know if he's still alive.
Yeah, he is.
He is? Okay.
I found him. Yeah, he's in Bakersfield right now. Yeah, his last arrest was 2012. He'd been arrested several times since his parole. I haven't been able to find out exactly what those charges were, but there are probably at least 8 or 10 more arrests after he was paroled between like 2008 and 2012, I think it was the last record I have on him. So, but yeah, he's still around.
Oh, wow. As far as I could tell, he is still denying that he killed Sal Mineo. And that kind of feeds into the conspiracy theories, if you want to call it that. That somebody said, oh, his sister, did you read this? Lionel Ray Williams' sister said she thought he was covering for the real killer, that it was a drug deal gone bad. So there's all this crazy stuff out there that people think that maybe the real killer is still out there.
I don't know. I thought that he admitted to it. He did admit it to his cellmate. His wife.
Yeah.
I don't think she'd volunteered that information. Under duress she may, but I can't see that. The fly in the ointment is the description of this person by the witnesses who came running. In a panic situation, and who knows what they saw really, because you're not processing what's happening as it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So that
and it's dark, and it's dark, and we all know how unreliable eyewitness accounts usually are. And of course, he was caught on tape admitting to the murder. I'm just saying officially. He's still saying, no, I didn't do it. But of course he would say that.
I believe he did. And I have not even, I'd love to get the transcript. It would be an interesting read. But those are tedious too, They're really hard to get through. Because the jury deliberated like 7 days on this.
Really?
To convict him, yeah. Which I'm sort of surprised. Now, maybe they were taking into account all those robbery attempts. I don't know, but it did take them a week to decide to convict. Goodness. And then it's so California. You're convicted of 50 years. Oh wait, 12. Okay, it's California. It's so California. It's just outrageous that you could take a life and 12 years. Oh, we didn't mean to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
It's just outrageous.
And Sal's murder is such a sad ending for somebody so talented and young, somebody on the cusp of making a comeback. It bothers me that he doesn't have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He still doesn't have a star after all this time. I think there's a petition going around. In fact, I signed it. So there's a petition going around to try and get a star for him. But
yeah. Well, I mean, somebody's got to cough up $50,000 because that's how much they cost. Yeah. So that's going to be the problem. There's lots of people that have the attention, but someone's got to cough up the money because the Chamber of Commerce ain't going to give them away. That's just their style. He would deserve that notoriety, that attention. And there's like, I don't know, 2,000 stars on the Walk of Fame or something outrageous. No, there's like 2,500 or 2,600 stars on the Walk of Fame. It's a bit of terrazzo that they pour in and put letters on it, but it's something that's held, very close as a money spinner to the Chamber of Commerce and no longer sentimental. When it began, it was. They honored X amount of people, and I think Joanne Woodward was the very first person to get a star, and it was an honor. But now, when I moved to Hollywood in '93, it was $2,000 you had to raise, and it went to 3, then it went to 5, then it went to 10, then it went to 15, then it went to 20, then it went straight from 20 to 50. And Absolute Vodka has a star on the Walk of Fame. MAC Cosmetics has a star on the Walk of Fame. So you get the idea. It's not, but an honor would be appropriate. Oh, but he'll be honored in my shop actually whenever I reopen my museum, because when I was at the garage, they were doing stucco work on Sal's garage, and I was able to grab some of the stucco from where he parked his car that night. So I have
when you went the last time to shoot the video?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So he'll have a spot of honor, in my little museum. Here's me with my silly rocks. but it's history, and these
Yeah.
pieces of stucco, they're real. They're from at the time, and they this awful events they witnessed, and the sounds echoed from them, and that's our history.
Yeah, that's great that you got that. I stumbled across this film the other day. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's from 2013. It's James Franco did a sort of a biopic of Sal, all about the last day of his life, and it's just called Sal. It was a really interesting film, and I think because I had done some research before watching it, I could appreciate how accurate most of the details were. It's worth giving it a watch if you're a fan of Sal Mineo.
Does it end with his death, or does it go into
No.
the trial and all that business?
No, it doesn't go into the trial. It ends with his murder, and then it shifts from there to actual footage from the news of the murder. And then there's a scene from Rebel that they show. Seems like there's something else that's actual footage. That it was a poignant ending. And I like that, having the actual footage interspersed, because there's some stuff earlier on too.
There was this guy I was talking to who met Sal. He had a still that he found of from Rebel, and it was at the Griffith Park Observatory, which figures into Rebel Without a Cause quite prominently. And at the end of the film, we know how the end of the film is. I'm not going to give it a spoiler, but there was an alternate ending filmed that was, I guess, originally it was supposed to be in black and white, and Warner Brothers decided at some point to refilm in color. But the original ending was going to be Plato, Sal Mineo's character, jumping off the back where the telescope was, where Jimmy had the knife fight in the back of it after they went to the observatory, and Sal was going to jump off of that because there was a dummy that they found that looked like Sal Mineo and Sal confirmed that that's what the original ending was, that Plato, the character he was playing, was going to jump off the back. It didn't end up happening, but it's just a fascinating alternative, ending that they decided to swap.
Yeah, I'm glad they swapped it. I think the ending that they went with works very well.
Yeah, and people, fell in love with him. Women especially, which is so interesting. But because he's a non-threat, I think. I don't think women necessarily wanted to have sex with him, but I think they just wanted to you know what I mean? It's like he wasn't a sexual
They wanted
object
to mother
so much.
him.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah,
and yes, and I'd say he was an attractive kid, so I'm sure there's a lot of, kind of stuff like that, but it wasn't like, he wasn't that kind of a guy.
Okay, full confession. When I was a teenager, I had a little picture of him in my wallet.
Aww.
I did. I had a little picture of him in my wallet. I had a James Dean key ring, and I had a 6-foot-tall picture of Jimmy from Giant that I got in Monterey when my mom and I went to California when I was 14 to visit my brother, who was working on a doctorate at Berkeley, and we went to Monterey, and I had just seen Giant. So I was just nuts over James Dean. I think that was the first James Dean movie I saw. And then East of Eden. It may have been the other way around, but Rebel came last because this was before video was at the ready. Blockbuster wasn't in my town at that point. And you had to wait for something to come on late night TV. Mm-hmm. And finally they were showing Rebel one night when I was 13 or 14. And I was just, oh, yes. The Holy Trinity. I've now seen the last one.
It's, East of Eden, it just blows my mind. I mean, if I can watch a movie and get moved, so actually, it's like ready for, tears. That's amazing that he had that power. But your Sal, so you had feelings for Sal, I mean, I know that it was a fan type of thing. So I'm not being funny or dismissive in any way. I take this stuff very seriously. I'm that way too with certain people. But did you feel like a kinship with him, or did you feel like somebody, you wanted to protect, or I'm curious.
I think I felt several things, and one was a kinship. Because I was this angsty teenager and feeling out of place. And I had great parents, but feeling that I was not of my time. I mean, I was the sixth grade kid who at recess had this coffee table movie book looking at pictures of stars from the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. I loved Humphrey Bogart when I was 12 years old. And nobody else my age knew who these people were. And the music that I listened to was not of my time. It was music from the 50s and 60s and 70s, not the 80s. So there was a kinship that I felt with him about being out of place, not quite belonging, but that kind of applies to Jimmy as well. But I also just thought he was adorable and vulnerable and in need of mothering, which is a strange thing for me to say because I was a kid at that point. But there you go.
No, but your heart goes out. You say you feel protective because you're so fond of them and they're such kind people in such awful circumstances that you just want to go, no. I'll, stay with me. I'm that way too. I would have been, you stand behind me, I'll take care of you kind of a thing, So yeah, I absolutely get that. I absolutely get it. Yeah.
Well, Scott, it's always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast again. It's just like I'm sitting around sometimes thinking of how can I get him back on the show? He's just freaking fun to talk to. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me, Christy. It's always fun.
And everybody check out Scott's amazing YouTube channel at Dearly Departed Tours. What's coming up next for the channel?
Well, I have another weird murder that happened in 1963 was the murder of Karen Kupcinet, who was the daughter of Irv Kupcinet. Was a huge columnist, a show business column that he had syndicated. And he was an influential person in the election of JFK. And Karen Kupcinet, his daughter, moved to Hollywood to be a starlet, and she was murdered Thanksgiving of 1963, right after Kennedy's assassination. And the rumor was that she was seen on a payphone that day saying the president's going to be shot. She was murdered in her apartment, and her body was discovered by Mark Goddard, who would play Don on Lost in Space.
My gosh.
It's still an unsolved crime. They're pretty sure they know who it was. And I did a feature on Karen fairly recently, but I just obtained a lot of her personal papers, and they arrived, and I'm going to be opening those on camera and then finishing up the story because I went back to Karen's apartment with some of her things. And really recently, actually the same time I did this, it's just down the street from Sal Mineo. And there's another murder of a country western personality by the name String Bean, who was big at the Grand Ole Opry, comedian, played the banjo, and his costume was like these pants, his trousers around basically his thighs. Just a comedian. And he and his wife were brutally murdered at their home after he performed at the Grand Ole Opry. I am putting together the Sal Mineo video too. So I'm excited about that.
Good. Well, you did one video where you walked past the front of the building, and it was just a very, very short mention. But yes, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with that because, you'll have the advantage of going there. So it'll be very interesting, I know.
Yeah, I like the fact that I live far enough away and close enough to LA so I can go in and dip in and get my fix and leave. So, because I don't miss living there so much. I miss the experiences, but it's a nice peaceful life out here in the desert.
So everybody check out Scott's channel. There's so much stuff on there that's just fascinating. And thanks again for coming back on the show.
Thanks, Christy. Thanks for having me.
Rock is lit.